Alright guys, TacticalRab again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day. So far, in just over 2 months' time, the World Championship in Texas will have come to a conclusion. We'll know who the champions are and exactly which teams that may need to make roster changes. Octane has been giving his prediction on which of the top teams will be making serious moves. He reckons that New York are going to probably blow it up entirely and have a very different look roster, but also Scrappy is a key piece of the puzzle. What he decides to do, staying at Toronto or going elsewhere, is going to determine things, but does he have a choice if Toronto keep him to a contract that we believe may still be in place? Very much interested to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. First of all, XDefiant. It's finally coming out in a couple of weeks. This is H on the right. This is Pac-Man on the left. It's been a long time, of course, since I've seen him in a competitive setting, but yeah, there's going to be a 4v4 XDefiant thing. So we'll see whether XDefiant actually kind of kicks off as a professional esports, because I know there's interest for those guys to make that happen. And to be honest, it's not like COD is in a great state right now. This is ranked as of yesterday. Not only can you call in UAVs, but here we are with unlimited ammo, and here's this guy with a shotgun attachment firing off missiles. I mean, have a look at this. This guy's literally just slamming cruise missiles into the side of the wall out of his shotgun. So, you know, you've got to think, what a phenomenal game that we are playing right here, and yeah, it's happening again. Rank play is chalked right now. The game is in a terrible state. Nobody denies it, and it's kind of unfortunate to witness. The other thing is, for competitive players, the game even on these comp maps isn't that good. This is 6-star. Of course, I'm pretty sure the pros are still playing on the old rotations for now. I imagine the new rotations will be played in an update relatively soon. But this is a I mean, I can't believe this, honestly. So is this aBeZy they're playing against here? Yes. So they're scrimming FaZe here, right? So the blue team, of course, are Ravens. The red team are the Atlanta FaZe guys. And it looks like they've got the perfect rotation. Right, have a look at this. We've got number 1 wrapping back. We've got number 3 in the new hardpoint. Number 4's pushed out. 7 is in old. 8's over here. So you've got to think, all right, where are the FaZe guys going to spawn? Probably over on this left side, right? Because the new hill's over here. They could spawn in the back. I think it's possible they spawned here. But where I did not expect them to spawn is literally in the hard point. 6 spawns in the point. 3 then spawn, 5 spawns in the points, and they're literally in perfect position to cap it, you know, with 10 seconds to go until the rotation. So yeah, that is pretty rare to say. I mean, it's not the point yet, and maybe when the first guy spawns, it wasn't yet the next hard point, 10 seconds to go. I don't know. The spawn system's weird. It's affected by all sorts of stuff, but the fact that both of those guys spawn right there in the next hard point when they have no control of that part of the map is somewhat confusing. So yeah, gotta put that one on the list, I suppose, Clayster, to remember for when they play proper matches. I did want to quickly mention as well, because there was some debate in the comments yesterday on which player has had a similarly poor stint to aSeam. I'm not going to show aSeam's line mag card again, it's pretty ugly. And understandably, you guys were saying, well, how about GodRx? Because obviously he was in the league at the start of the season on the Ravens. And honestly, that's a fair analysis as well. I was talking about MettalZ from a couple of years ago, and honestly, the reason why I didn't mention GodRx is because I was like, well, he wasn't actually that bad. He was obviously terrible, but to be fair, the numbers are probably a bit better than aSeam's. Well, they are by the numbers anyway. aSeam at a 0.69 in the series that he played, GodRx at a 0.77. So it's not much better, is it? Let's be honest. But it's not quite as bad as aSeam stint. The hardpoint, to be fair, he had a 0.85 with his hardpoint wasn't actually too bad. His search and destroy was woeful though, with a 0.86 or 0.67. Sorry, I don't know where I got 0.86 from. 0.67 with yeah, it just wasn't great, was it? The GodRx stint. This was his control as well, a 0.72. This was honestly the most egregious. I mean, look at this. 0.72 in control, 13 kills per 10. Like, it ain't great. But to be fair, it was similar to ReeaL, I suppose, wasn't it? So yeah, GodRx didn't have a good stint, but aSeam's technically was worse before Fellow, of course, came in to replace GodRx, and the rest from then is obviously history. Now, before we get into the Rostermania stuff, this is the final part of the Breaking Point fan survey. Most popular active players. It's kind of crazy to me, and maybe it's not a surprise, but it's interesting nonetheless that you can be, you know, a player for a decade, right? You can have been around, build up so many fans over the years, touch, you know, so many different touch points with the community over the last several years, and all it takes is for someone to join OpTic for a couple of months, and all of a sudden they have more fans than you. And that is basically how it works. Impressed that Scrappy is even here, but in terms of most popular active players, this was the question that was asked. Fan responses to which active CDL players do you support? The overall ranking is Shotzzy, Dashy, Scrappy's third, then Kenny and Pred. So, you know, that is basically the OpTic tier list, and then Scrappy's in there, which makes you wonder about Scrap's future, where he might go. Obviously, people were looking at this and saying, well, it's only a matter of time, Scrap to OpTic. I also wonder, like what you guys think about this. Let's say Toronto disbanded as an organization and they disappeared for some reason. Say we're New York and Scrappy had, and like for some reason OpTic lost a player and FaZe lost a player, so they have to make a change. If you're Scrappy, which team do you choose? Because Drazah, he made the decision to join FaZe over OpTic. He had both options, he went for one over the other. Other players would choose differently. Pred, for example, we're not so sure on the conversations there, but you know, maybe you'd argue he would choose OpTic over FaZe because there's benefits either way. You join OpTic, you know, I don't need to mention the benefits that are involved in that, but are you going to win as much as joining the FaZe trio? Not necessarily. That's a decision that Drazah felt like FaZe was absolutely the right decision for him, and I believe that it was. From a personality side, from what he wants to achieve, Drazah joining FaZe just makes so much sense. For Scrappy, if he had to choose one of the two, what do you think he would do? Would he choose FaZe, like instead of Drazah, hypothetically, and take the championships? Or would he go to OpTic and the benefits that involves? To me, I think he'd prefer to join OpTic. But, you know, I don't know. This kind of shows maybe exactly what's going on there. And it's interesting that Scrappy is like the only player in the league that's managed to get this high. The other players are as follows. Clayster is second behind Scrap, so I imagine he's not far behind, probably 6th on this list to be fair. Then Attach is just behind him. Then Ghosty, actually. So, yeah, I mean, all these guys, except from Attach, have been an OpTic at some point, apart from Scrappy as well, right? Because, you know, Clay was an OpTic back in the day. Attach has never been part of the Green Wall. Ghosty was last season, so he still gets some fans on the Thieves side. And then Envoy as well, who people still like from the OpTic days. So, yeah, this maybe isn't massively surprising, but it certainly is interesting that, you know, you can be an Attach, a Clayster, a Slasher, like any of these guys that have been around for a decade, and Pred and Kenny join OpTic for a couple of months and it doesn't matter. But of course, the question is, will that team remain a thing forever, or will they make a change, let's say, after the World Championship? Frankly, we're not going to know until champs. This OpTic team is not going to make a move before the World Championship, of course, given the way they're currently performing. Even if they came like top 12 at Major 3, Major 4, they're still going to have this roster going into champs. So really what matters is how they perform at the World Championship. That will determine things. I think it's possible that the Subliners might even make a change before the World Championship. I think that's certainly not impossible. Maybe it's also possible for Toronto as well. If they really have a bad home major, they might think about, you know, I don't know, bringing Hixie back. I think it would be a strange decision. I don't expect it to happen. New York, I think there's a possibility. If they get top 12 at Major 3, they might think about getting rid of Sib and bringing someone else in. I wouldn't completely rule that out, but probably all the top 4 teams will turn up to the World Championship with the rosters that they currently have. So whatever happens there is going to determine what happens in the off-season. But of course, we can make some educated guesses maybe as to what is going to happen based on what we are currently seeing. And that's what Octane is trying to do.
Right now, what top 4 team make the biggest change in the offseason? Probably New York. I mean, New York's definitely gonna make a change, but I don't know what direction they're gonna end up going. I feel like this is like a big moment because this is where the champs team will like break up. I think over the offseason. After that, I'm not sure because I think Scrap's a free agent, so that's gonna move pretty much everything as well. It's gonna be a crazy Rostermania, I think. But I think New York's gonna be like a completely new look team. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see what happens with that because Scrap's gonna be like probably the catalyst for a lot of roster changes over this offseason. Like wherever he decides to go is like where the first change I think is gonna happen. Because like say he goes to like OpTic or something for like Ken or Brandon, and then like whoever Ken or Brandon, then they're gonna go somewhere, and it's just gonna be like a whole thing. But I think Ernie's gonna like start everything off because he's obviously the most important piece of Rostermania. So I'm excited to see what he does. Whether he wants to stay in Toronto or whether he wants to join a team, I don't know what he's gonna do.
Worth discussing the Scrappy situation here though, because Octane believes he might be a free agent. I'm not sure that is true, but I don't know the full details of his contract situation. If he is a free agent, obviously that is a massively big deal. In the same way that when Scump was, you know, gonna retire, Shotzzy was free to go where he wanted, they then locked him back down. The same story for HyDra as well, when OpTic were gonna get him, and, you know, maybe Subliners paid him 500k or whatever crazy money to keep him onto a new deal. Most of these deals are 1+1s, where you'll sign a 1 year, and then if the team wants to extend you, they'll extend you for another year. I think Scrappy either signed one of those last year for a renewal, just because the team was going to blow it up, right? We believe that during last year's off-season, that Scrappy was not a happy man at getting held to what he felt in contract jail, because they were apparently going to sell his teammates elsewhere. There was all this talk about Los Angeles Thieves getting CleanX, getting Insight to kind of replace Octane and, you know, trade things around, and Scrappy wasn't a happy man staying on Toronto. Then it turned out they were going to run it back. That's what they did. So, you know, Scrappy was, I think, under contract for last off-season. The question is he still under contract for this off-season? Because if Toronto are going to choose whether they extend him, obviously they're going to do that, right? Like, there's no world in which they decline an extension on his contract. They will keep Scrappy if they can. The question, therefore, is if he does have a +1 extension, which Toronto will activate for next season, then that makes him a harder target to get. You'd have to buy him out of that contract if you were another team, which might be rather expensive, although it could be worth it for certain teams. But if Scrappy's deal is at an end and he actually is a full free agent, then it does make things very interesting because he can simply pick and choose whether he stays at Ultra or whether he walks away and goes to another team that may potentially want him. And other teams will want him, right? Because let's say FaZe win champs, and maybe even if OpTic are seconds, but they lose comfortably, they might think, are we good enough to beat this FaZe team? In the same way that this happened after Cold War, FaZe won the World Championship. They won 3 other events that season in very dominant fashion, generally speaking. But after the World Championship, basically every team said, okay, we need to change to beat these guys. And obviously the OpTic Envy merger was happening as well, so they were going to change anyway. But many teams that off-season going into Vanguard formed rosters with the intention to beat FaZe. And that's exactly what they did in Vanguard. That OpTic Texas team beat FaZe every time they played them. That Surge roster that was also built to try and be a FaZe killer, they achieved exactly that. So, you know, when they played them in the finals that season. So, you know, I think we might see a similar thing this offseason if FaZe were to win champs, of teams really trying to find ways to build a roster that can actually beat those guys going forward. And Scrappy's decision is going to be important if he actually has a decision to make, or whether somebody else comes in and tries to buy him out if his contract is as we think it might be. Because I found this clip up here from 2022, so a year and a half ago, where Scrappy said that he's in basically a 3-year deal, which might be a 2+1, I imagine. So that probably has Scrappy under contract for last year, for this year, and my guess would be that it's a +1 extension on next year. So I don't think he's going to be a free agent. Doesn't mean that he can't necessarily leave. FaZe are probably going to stick. If they don't win champs, they might think about getting Scrappy for Drazah, but I think that right now is very unlikely. I don't know if FaZe feel they can upgrade from what they currently have, and the results from now to the end of the season will probably justify that, even if they weren't to win champs. So I don't expect FaZe to change for next season. I do agree with Octane that I think New York Subliners most definitely will. They were kind of up and down last season as well, but they were up, you know, more often than not, certainly when the events mattered. Kismet was probably better at last year's game. Of course, they had Priestahh there, who's no longer there. HyDra was probably better at last year than this year as well, even though I still think he's phenomenal at this game, but MW2 HyDra was a completely ridiculous animal that was, as Scrappy at times said, basically just carrying his entire team. So I'm inclined to agree that probably the Subliners will consider a big blow it up, but of course if they do blow it up, that leaves talented players like, you know, who knows, Skyz or Kiz or even HyDra as potentially available to go elsewhere. So I think there are some questions to be raised on Rostermania here. I think I'm inclined to agree with Octane that probably the Subliners that we see now will be rather different to what we see next year, but the Scrappy question is the big one because he's obviously the big target for multiple reasons. If he is locked down to Toronto, then it'll be difficult for anybody else to sign him, but it's not impossible, I suppose. Or Toronto might make their own moves to try and build a great roster around Scrappy if they don't get what they want in terms of results from now to the end of the season. So very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Just to mention, tonight we are going to be having the 20 women 1 Dashy. I believe they've got it sorted. They've got the women lined up, so we'll be tuning into this one probably more. Actually, it's kind of late, isn't it? But whatever, I'll figure out a way to get some of it watched. But very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.